All right, so here are the answers for our 30, 45, and 60, our trigonometric functions. This information, be sure you have it correct, and be sure that, like I said before, this really is stuff that you should begin to be able to answer and recall these answers pretty quickly. If you have to build each triangle, that's okay, but you'll be better at this and faster if you are able to memorize these. So, next, we get into really the last concepts where we're finding exact values for each trigonometric function. I've broken this down into degrees. Then we're going to find it for our secant, cosecant, our reciprocal trigonometric functions, and then we're going to try and practice doing this in radians. All this is doing the same thing. We're finding exact values for trigonometric functions. So, first I have steps written out. You see that our first step, and this is for our sine, cosine, and tangent. So when we have normal, just tangents, cosines, or sines that we're looking for, we need to first determine our reference angle. So remember, our reference angle, we can sketch it, is the acute angle created with the x-axis. So if we have 315 degrees, we are wrapping around and coming into the fourth quadrant. So we are in quadrant 4, and our reference angle is going to be 360. It's what we're missing right here. So it's 360 minus the 315, which is the 45 degrees. So we need to find out what this would be. So what you now have is a right triangle that you can create. We know that red reference angle is 45. So we have our special triangle. Remember, our hypotenuse is always 1. And if our hypotenuse is 1, what's our two legs, our x and our y values? Well, it would be 1 over the square root of 2 for both. So what we've done so far, if we've done step 1, we determined our reference angle. We've created the right triangle inside of it. And now we're going to be able to, we've already determined the quadrant of the original angle. Now we're going to be able to figure this out. Well, tangent, remember, is opposite over hypotenuse. So we're going to have our opposite of our angle is 1 over radical 2. So 1 over radical 2 over our hypotenuse, 1. So we know that this is really just 1 over radical 2. Now the last step, step 4, tells us we need to write the correct sign. This is when we look at this chart that I have up at the top of our page. What this chart is telling us for functions, so for sine and cosecant, it's positive in the first, second quadrants and negative in the third and fourth. Cosine and secant are positive in the first and fourth. Tangents positive in the first and third. Now there's a mnemonic device that we can use to be able to remember this. So if we draw our 4 quadrants, here we have them. The saying goes, all students take calculus or add sugar to coffee. What this means is in our first quadrant, all of our signs, all of our trig functions are positive. Notice in the first quadrant here, all of them are positive. Next, in the second quadrant, S is what's positive. So our sine is the only one that's positive in the first. In our third quadrant, T, our tangent, is what's positive. And in our fourth quadrant, C, so our cosines are what's positive. So again, all students take calculus or add sugar to coffee. So now we look back. We know that our tangent is in the third quadrant. So we look here, and in our third quadrant, tangent is what should be positive. So we have a positive value. So our answer, tangent of 315, is equal to 1 over the square root of 2. We obviously will practice a few more of these here. So next we have cosine of 240. So first let's sketch this. So 240, we started our reference, our initial side. We start wrapping around. It's over 90, it's over 180, and it's not quite up to 270. So if we draw this in, we know that we're in the third quadrant. We need to find our reference angle. Well, in our third quadrant, it's back at what this might be here. So we can take our angle, which is the 240, and subtract 180, and we realize that our reference angle is 60 degrees. So we can draw our right triangle, and this time our angle is 60 degrees. So we know our hypotenuse is always 1. If our hypotenuse in a 30, 60, 90 is 1, our short side is half of that, and our long side over here would be 1/2 times radical 3, which is radical 3 over 2. So we're trying to find our cosine of this angle. So our cosine is opposite over hypotenuse. So we get our opposite side is the square root of 3 over 2 over our hypotenuse, which is 1. So square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1 is just square root of 3 over 2. And now we have to determine whether or not this thing is positive or negative. So we look at our all students take calculus. Cosine in the third quadrant. Well, we're in the third quadrant. The only one that's positive is tangent, so we realize that this needs to be a negative value. So the cosine of 240 degrees equals negative square root of 3 over 2. We'll do one more. So we have the sine of 120. So first we can sketch our angle. So we know we have 0, 90, 180. If you need to write this on all of them, that's fine. And 270. Sine of 120. So we're coming past 90. We're not making it to 180. So here we are. Our quadrant is the second quadrant. Our reference angle, well, that's the angle it's creating with that x-axis. So we've got this right triangle in here, and this missing angle would be 180 minus the 120. So we learned that that's 60 degrees. So we've got another 30, 60, 90 with our 60 in here. So we know our radius is always 1. Our short side would be 1/2. And our long leg would be radical 3 over 2, or 1/2 times radical 3. So if we're finding sine of the 120, we know that this is opposite over hypotenuse. So we know our opposite is 1/2. Our hypotenuse is 1. So we can answer the sine of 120 is 1/2. And in our second quadrant, sine is supposed to be positive. So we know sine of 120 equals positive 1/2. Now there are 3 examples at the bottom of this page. I'd like you guys to go ahead and try.